there was this emanation from this basically face of light that was coming right into me of pure, pure love. It was so loving. I knew that there could be no sin, nothing I could do that would prevent me from getting that love, which is what unconditional love is. But we often throw that term around, unconditional love, but to actually feel it, and like not only that, I've always been loved. It was this eternal sense of love and it seemed to ground the universe. And it was not just for me, it was for everybody, but it felt so wonderful. So my fear kind of left at that point. I just have to say, at this point, I knew this was an adventure.
Well, hello, Peter Stenshoel. Welcome to the show. I'm truly honored by you joining me and looking forward to our conversation.
Doing great. And yourself?
Oh, doing great. And I got to tell you, every week we bring you powerful stories about life after death, awakening, and what it means to be human. And if that resonates, you'll love what's coming, because today I am joined by Peter Stenshoel, a musician, poet, radio creator, and an art model whose life was transformed by a near-death experience in the mid-1970s. So at 20 years old, newly married and working as a college janitor, Peter laid down for an afternoon nap with a Robert Hunter record playing and woke instead in a vast pitch black void, fully conscious and yet outside his body. And so from that darkness, a point of light grew into a towering diamond-like face resembling Hunter, radiating an intelligence of pure love. So Peter realized that every flaw and sin in his life was completely outshone by a personal, unconditional love, and that this love extends to everyone. Now, since then, Peter has lived without fear of death, with deeper compassion and a refusal to participate in inhumane systems. His path has run through music, radio theater, musical study, parenting, and now art modeling, where he quietly tries to embody the love he encountered. So, Peter, thank you for being here.
It's my great privilege and honor and pleasure. Brad, thank you.
Oh, beautiful. My pleasure, too. Now, you got a great story to tell. I can't wait to share it with the audience. I tell you what, I'll go ahead and let you kick the NDE story off. And after that, we'll get into some conversation. I got some follow-up questions to really dig even deeper.
Thank you. I was 20 years old. My wife and I got married when we were each 20, and that does figure into the story. And we were both working part-time as we were college students at the same college at the time. This was in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And my part-time job was as a janitor at the college. And I just worked early morning hours, part-time, and then I came home early afternoon. And I was done for the day. Maybe would have classes later or something like that. But I knew I wanted to just lay down, have a nap. But before I did that, I had a what they call a 3-2 beer. It's a low alcohol beer that they sell in Minnesota. I had a can of that, and then for some reason I had an instant coffee, just a cup of instant coffee, and it might figure in to this event, so that's why I'm mentioning it. And then I did put on this Robert Hunter record, Tales of the Great Rum Runners, Robert Hunter, the lyricist for the Grateful Dead. I greatly admired that band, especially the songs and the lyrics written by Robert Hunter, who I felt championed underdogs, did express a lot of love in some of his music for everybody. There just seemed to be something magical about them and the band. And I had seen them live. Anyway, so I put that record on, and I had a little stand so that the stand of the long playing record cover, those were like, Yay by Yay back in the day. It was facing where I was sleeping. And then I fell asleep. And I don't know if the record had finished playing or not. All I know was that I was in this black void, nowhere near my body, and it was very conscious. This was not a dream. I am certain of that, because I was far more conscious than I am in my dreams, although I have had some amazing dreams. But this was something different. And I began to wonder where I was. I knew who I was. I was Peter. I seemed to have sort of a shape. Imagine this is me. I feel like I'm going feet first, flat in this complete darkness. And I began to panic because I thought, if I'm not in my body, I maybe am dying, or maybe I'm in some other realm and I can't get back to my body. So as soon as I panicked, I saw a little pinpoint of light. And whether I moved to the light, it was sort of on my right, whether I moved to the light or the light moved to me, the whole point was that it soon became as tall as like a 3-story building, and it was the face resembling Robert Hunter. Now, whether this was like symbolism that spirit was using, or whether it had something to do with Robert Hunter's soul, I can't say for sure. But it was him, but not only was it him, or did it resemble him, there was this emanation from this basically face of light that was coming right into me of pure, pure love. It was so loving. I knew that there could be no sin, nothing I could do that would prevent me from getting that love, which is what unconditional love is. But we often throw that term around, unconditional love, but to actually feel it, and like not only that, I've always been loved. It was this eternal sense of love and it seemed to ground the universe. And it was not just for me, it was for everybody, but it felt so wonderful. So my fear kind of left at that point. I just have to say, at this point, I knew that this was an adventure. And I still wasn't sure what was going on. The next thing that I saw, I was floating head up, again, sort of in this direction, feet first, and I was seeing the top of what looked like an auditorium, the top of an auditorium, maybe where they would have the struts for lighting equipment and such. I've worked in theater, so I'm quite familiar with what that looks like. But then I started floating down. I'm not hearing anything, but I see there's this huge audience of cheering people, or people that are very animated, and they're watching a band. And I could tell right away, this is the Grateful Dead. So another Grateful Dead, sort of a vision of the Grateful Dead playing a concert, whether it was in real time somewhere in a different time zone, because this was sort of like 1 o'clock in the afternoon, Midwestern time, or whether this was just a vision for me, I don't know. And I came down slowly behind the rhythm guitarist, Bob Weir, for those of you who know the band. I was behind him, kind of looking at his back as he was playing. Okay, the next thing I know, I'm in a desert scene, kind of watching in a trench in the desert, people that look kind of like Bedouins or some sort of nomads, wearing the kind of protective gear you do against sandstorms, but they were carrying instruments of some sort, maybe antique instruments. And I was told this was an earlier incarnation of the Grateful Dead, one of which I might have been part of. And I was told this group of bardic souls comes to Earth from time to time in times of the need of a message of love and of acceptance. And I began to understand this whole broader dimension of what that band was about. I mean, I've always known that there was something about them that attracted me to them. I love music of all kinds, but Deadheads are known to be kind of extremely in love with the band, and that's a phenomenon still going on with Dead and Company. Anyway, so after I saw that, that's when a tunnel of light opened up. A tunnel that it was sort of like a tunnel with it was black, but it had sort of white squares kind of going in sort of at an angle, and I started speeding up really fast in this tunnel. Well, coincidentally, I had read the book Life After Life by Raymond Moody, which was in the counseling office at the college where I was a janitor, and when I had free moments, I would open that book and read it. And so I knew what was happening was I was heading for imminent death on the other side in a wonderful place called heaven, or whatever you want to call it, the afterlife. And at this point, I called out to God. I said, I just got married. I don't want to leave a young 20-year-old widow. We know we're going to be having children by adoption and or birth or whatever, not childbirth. Those will be in my future. I need to return for the sake of all of them. And I started slowing down and did a little U-turn. God answered my call, apparently. Did a U-turn, then started going faster and faster and faster until I hit my body. I was on a futon on the floor, and my body kind of jumped up a little bit like that. I was back in my body, and I was feeling completely ecstatic about what had happened. And I was in a state of, well, the sense of bliss and ecstasy lasted around 2 weeks. And when I began to tell people about it, there were different reactions. My wife, God love her, she totally accepted this. My mom said, no, that was a dream, which was a bit of a disappointment coming from your mother, you know. And then I told a couple friends, and when they looked at me a little odd, I thought, okay, this is something that I will tell at times when people need to hear it, or other experiencers of near-death experience. I luckily knew what a near-death experience was. I know back in the 70s, many people still did not. So I consider that to be a fortunate book that I had read prior to this experience.
Yes, not a lot of people did, but Raymond Moody did do that book. In fact, it was 50 years ago. We just went to the IANS conference in Chicago earlier this year, and it was the 50th anniversary, and Raymond Moody was there and talked and spoke, and he's still as brilliant as ever. So, you know, it's interesting. NDEs oftentimes have, car crash, heart attack, whatever it might be. And your heart stops, and then you kind of leave your body and you have an experience and you come back. Yours sounds very much like that, except that it sounds also like you were 20 years old and super healthy and kind of just took a nap. There's another category of these experiences called OBEs, which is out-of-body experience, which some people have those, can then repeatedly have those. And there is no sort of heart attack or accident or trauma to the body. They literally just go into sort of go to sleep, kind of go into sleep paralysis and have various issues happen, and they separate from their body. But and many people say we do it every night. It's just that we're not conscious of it. We bring no memory of it back. And yet there are those that could certainly do that. Do you have a feel for if you lie in the NDE or the OBE category?
My answer is very clearly this. I've had many OBEs, out-of-body experiences in my life, even before I met my wife, and especially many after this experience. But this was not like that. And I keep thinking, well, what possibly could have happened that would, because I was not in any dire medical situation that I knew of. All I can come up with is maybe sleep apnea, maybe the effects of the beer and the coffee, kind of, a stimulant and a depressant, did something odd number to my heart. I have known to have sleep apnea, but not severe cases. So I was wondering if maybe that had stopped my heart temporarily. But the reason that I think the out-of-body experiences have a completely different reality to them or feeling to them. This featured that tunnel, and none of my other OBEs, none of my out-of-body experiences have had this tunnel that Raymond Moody describes. I have like zoomed over moonlight, over waves of desert. I've gone up into space and seen the earth from up on high in my out-of-body experiences. I rarely see people, but when I do, children seem to notice me and adults don't. And so I've had a number of very very interesting out-of-body experiences, and I always love when they happen. I can't make them happen. They seem to be spontaneous.
Yeah, so I would say an NDE almost feels like it's an invitation from the other side to come on over, check things out, sometimes decide, do I want to stay or not? And oftentimes you don't even get a choice, you have to go back. But it was so that you had that experience and you took it back and you shared it. Sometimes it kind of feels like an OBE is where you're not invited over, where you kind of figure out how to do it, and then your body goes flying over there and it has kind of free reign. It wasn't invited to a particular situation. It wandered over and landed anywhere, and all sorts of different things happened. But in some sense, it's still the other side, and that's the commonality.
Yeah, I think there are similarities to it, certainly. But I don't know if out-of-body experiences would convince me that I don't have to be afraid of death. The effects of this this near-death experience really were profound, and I guess I just I feel there's a qualitative difference that I recognize, but that's not to say that other people might not have out-of-body experiences that have very profound natures to them. And I've heard some on your interviews, so I honor those, and I think that all of this is very interesting and a fascinating subject to discuss and learn about.
Well, yeah, and I agree. I think every experience is unique, and that's why sharing them like this and for folks to listen to it is really, really helpful for folks in many ways. So let's go back to the NDE then. How did it sort of wrap up? And then when you came out of it, were you able to share? Because remember, Raymond Moody was the only book, Life After Life, that existed back then. Nobody knew about this. So if you ran around telling folks about it, they might want to lock you up.
Yeah, no, my wife accepted it. My mother just said it was a dream, and I think it almost scared her. My description, I probably sounded like a raving lunatic on the phone. This was a phone call I made to my mom, but she was nearby in a western suburb of Minneapolis. But yeah, and a couple very close friends, I mentioned it to them, and because they looked at me a little odd, and I began to think, I'm not going to talk about this to too many people right now. I was hoping that but I did start buying every book that started coming out on near-death experiences. I would purchase and make sure I read it cover to cover, and in a few years, more and more people like Dr. Melvin Morris, and a lot of people, names that you'd be familiar with from studying it yourself. And I was thankful for every one of those because it corroborated what had happened to me. Now, I don't know if I wrote a letter to Raymond Moody or not. In retrospect, it might have been a good idea to do that. I did send a description of the experience to the NDERF website that has all these wonderful, it's a great site to read lots of stories from around the world of near-death experiences, but I didn't get a response from them, and I'm thinking because of the rock and roll elements, what I consider might have been considered hippy-dippy, they maybe considered this to be more like a drug trip or something, but believe me, I was not on any kind of drug or anything other than a little low alcohol beer and caffeine.
Well, I don't know why they didn't consider. Maybe they just had a rush of folks realizing they existed and got a bunch of inbound, and it overwhelmed them at that time. I wouldn't suspect, if you're doing this in the 70s, that hippy-dippy would have been a problem, because that might have been a very common sort of approach. But, I don't know. I think it's interesting. If you'd reached out to Raymond Moody, you might have been part of his research, because that's certainly what he had done. And regardless, the interesting thing, like yourself and the rest of folks, is it's an experience that happened to you. It's very clear. It's like a dream will fade, but an NDE experience is like burned in forever, very high resolution. Yes. Can't forget a thing. And oftentimes because of that, folks that have them come back and they have different reactions to them. Some folks, with pure love, I'm going to take that through my life and change it forever. I'm going to help everyone. Other people are kind of afraid of it. Some folks are afraid of death still, but others are, they welcome it, but they're not, going to, artificially, accelerate it. But when it comes, they aren't afraid of it at all. But it really changes the way they live their lives in many different ways. Now, this is back in the 70s. If you think about the 70s, 80s, 90s, and so on, what was that trajectory of changes and experiences that you had while you integrated?
One thing that happened was I began to be witness, and when I would take a nap, I would see things like car accidents happening or houses on fire. And I think I was called, I didn't know at first what that was. Those seemed a little odd. And I think my spirit was starting to do some work to help bring souls out of, disaster, just to be a cheerleader for them. It's good, you can go. People who had died. Another thing that happened was I had what I call a God experience. We were living, the near-death experience happened in the upstairs apartment of a large house owned by my wife's parents. We moved down to the lower area in a couple years. And I was listening to this song called Ripple by the Grateful Dead. If my words did glow with the gold of sunshine, if my words were played on the harp unstrung, would you hear my voice come through the music? Would you hold it near as it were your own? When I heard, would you hear my voice? All of a sudden, I was aware of God. It was the voice of God coming through the music, okay? It was utterly amazing. So I remember that experience. And then not too long after, when I had a slightly different work schedule. I came home for lunch and was going to return. I was actually listening to Joni Mitchell's Hajira, which is just a wonderful, it was the album Hajira, and the out song was Amelia, about Amelia Earhart. But all of a sudden, as I was sitting cross-legged, kind of looking at the stereo, I could feel a presence enter from the back of the room. And I knew right away this was Jesus. Jesus walked up to me and touched my right shoulder and then kept walking. I didn't actually see him, but I sensed him walking. He just touched my shoulder, kept walking. When he hit the wall, it's as if the wall lit up with in bright yellow letters, Jesus, 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 Jesus. And when he touched me, I had that same sense of unconditional love that I had in the near-death experience. It was overwhelming, and that caused me to then start telling friends about it again too, and getting the funny looks. But that was a game changer as well. And I think maybe the near-death experience helped open up a doorway, a portal for me, my consciousness to be able to have these extraordinary experiences.
Yes, and oftentimes that is the case when people come back from an NDE, that they then have, kind of the veil is thinned a little bit in certain areas and you can kind of see through a little more. So your psychic ability might be there. You might have those cognitions or dreams that are, giving you insights into things that might be happening, in the future. Were you able to sort of pinpoint any of those extra capabilities beyond that, ways that you could connect with people more and maybe, in other ways?
Relatives who passed away would come to me. And in one case, it was a relative of my mother, and I had not heard her story. I saw a name scrawled in ash on a wall, and I had the sense, okay, this is someone that is trying to tell me something. And I talked to my mother, and she says, "Oh yeah, this is my, this is my cousin." And there was this tragic thing that happened where her apartment caught on fire. Her father, who was actually, her husband, who was a fireman, actually came too late. When he opened the door, the flames just totally consumed her, and she died. And I thought, how interesting that she's coming to me, showing me very viscerally that she had become ash, but was still alive. And I think by this time, I think my mother was starting to think maybe I was onto something, because we were both kind of astonished about this one. And since that time, I've had, school friends who have passed away. They come and tell me that, and then I find out, yes, indeed, they have. I feel that it's not that I'm a clearinghouse so much, although I think I have met with some confused people that did not, they were a little unsure they had died. I know normally that you would think that they would go straight up to the, but anyway, I don't myself see them go into the light, but I let them know it's okay. And I had an Aunt Emma who ran our family funeral home. My father grew up, my grandfather on my dad's side started a funeral home in Crookston, Minnesota. And he died before I was born, but his daughter, Emma, who never married, she became the businesswoman who ran the family funeral home. And we visited there quite often. So I would see things that a young person often doesn't see, like bodies being given formaldehyde, or a child who'd been run over by a car, not yet in a casket. Often they'd be in and we would sleep upstairs. Our cousins, my brothers and my cousins, and I, and tell ghost stories. So we had kind of lived this kind of interesting childhood, being exposed to things like death, but that did not at all make me feel like I shouldn't fear death. I did fear death. Up until my near-death experience, I was deathly afraid of dying. I want to make a point about my aunt, by the way. When I encountered confused souls who weren't sure they were dead, I would call my Aunt Emma to bring her band of angels and basically guide them. Since that was, I think she was extremely psychic, and I don't think she would talk about it much, but I am certain now that she could sense spirits around her, and she probably was a help and a guide to them. So I just want to, I want to just thank my Aunt Emma for her major job before and after her death.
Wow. Okay. So you're saying that your Aunt Emma that ran the funeral home and took in these bodies and prepared them.
Along with her assistants, yes.
Along with her assistants, yes. She would on occasion find an experience about the spirit or the soul of this being that was having trouble, and she would bring her spirits in.
I'm thinking that because she's the person that I always go to. Now, this hasn't happened that much recently that I've encountered confused souls. It's more often people that that have been to the light and returned. And most of them are friends. Some of them are personalities in the music of drama, music, storytelling. I think I'm part of a bardic soul community. And so, I get people like Louis Armstrong visiting, or Frank Zappa or Jimi Hendrix, just from time to time, or Liberace at one time. Really, it's kind of a fascinating thing. And otherwise, I still get relatives coming as well from time to time.
Well, in what form were they visiting? Maybe you can share a couple of these experiences with Liberace and Zappa and others.
This is usually when I'm sleeping or napping, and then I become kind of hyper aware inside the nap. And I think you had mentioned I'm a musician. I'm a composer and musician. I've written for theater and for bands, and both jazz and blues and rock and folk. And Liberace came up to me in this sort of vision I was having as I was napping. He gave me a big hug, and he said, I just love your music. I love what you do. Thank you so much for your creativity and what you bring into the world. And my parents never watched him. I was never like a huge fan of him, but I do recognize he was a talented pianist. I've seen a couple of tapes of his shows, and I know he was certainly no slouch at all. And I know he was loved by many people. So I treasured that.
So these other experiences were also kind of like an OB in the nighttime, except that they visited you.
Yeah, they're just coming to visit me. I'm not. If I would know if it's an out-of-body experience visiting them. I don't do out-of-body experiences in the heavenly realm. Unfortunately, it'd be kind of interesting if I could. In fact, I often wish I had maybe gone to the light in that tunnel, because maybe they were going to send me back, but I might have met my relatives who had passed. I might have had the life review. I never had the life review, and quite frankly, I'm fascinated by them because everybody says every little single thing you do is replayed back to you in some way. And I'm looking forward to that, quite frankly, when I get there.
Yeah, it's kind of nice, those that go for an NDE and have a life review halfway through their life. They come back and they go, oh, I guess I can clean up my act and really change my entire life. So when I finally do go over and I do my final life review, the second half might be a little bit more cleaned up, than the first. But regardless, it's all experiences for lessons and wisdom. So I think that's good. Now, I would say if you had this experience, you were a musician before, you had Zappa, Liberace, and others visit you. How did this impact you going forward with your musical abilities?
Well, for some reason, my musical abilities seem to have taken on a level that is sort of unexplainable. I mean, I did take jazz drumming lessons, and I took some classical piano lessons when I was younger. But my ability, I was a sort of a self-taught jazz musician, and I played keyboards, and I played with other groups, and usually it was playing with other people. I felt that that sense of doing this thing together, especially in front of audiences, was absolutely such a beautiful energy exchange, and it would inspire me. And I think maybe I'm drawing an inspiration. Maybe I was drawing an inspiration from these other artists who had passed on. I don't know. It's quite possible that I was. I remember at one time I got the feeling there was a reed man named Eric Dolphy who died unfortunately quite young, and he was brilliant. And I all of a sudden got this intuition. He had been teaching me how to do things on piano. And so, yeah, I think I have this relationship with bards and musicians on the other side. I've also been a storyteller in the sense of doing radio theater. And, I loved writing stories in school. Writing was my favorite subject. But I think something did open up with the near-death experience that sort of has helped me. I know that something about my presence in audiences, they seem to resonate with it. They seem to be delighted that I'm there, I guess. I mean, I don't feel like tooting my own horn too much. I'm a Norwegian American immigrant after all. We don't toot our own horns. I'm not an immigrant. I didn't move here. My grandparents moved from Norway, but all the same, now that you're bringing this up, I'm aware that maybe it's a wider community of souls helping me, that have helped me. And maybe they have messages to get out. Maybe they want to express something through me, which is fine. I don't have any issue with that.
Yeah, no, I think that makes a lot of sense. And for you to have private, music lessons from those from the other side is a bit of an advantage. If that makes your creativity in creating music in various different forms elevated, sharing that with the world is ideal, I think. Now, what would you say to folks that are watching this right now that are, this is based on your experience, right? That are maybe deeply spiritual or maybe very religious, or maybe they're an atheist. You have all different folks that would come and listen to this. What, from your experience, would be what you would share with those people based on sort of that category of worldly views?
Well, I have atheist friends. I'm in a community called Shape Note Singing and Shape Note Singers, and we don't argue religion or politics. But they're not militant atheists. They're very friendly. And I've talked to them about my near-death experience, and they say, well, if it happened to me, that would be great. But because it hasn't happened to me, I can't really necessarily go along with it. And that's fine. I don't feel like I have to be a proselytizer for the fact that there's life after death. They'll find out soon enough. I'll tell you, one of my experiences was there was a great atheist, as you know, Steve Allen, who was a great entertainer. He was like the original host of The Tonight Show. He wrote novels. He was a musician, very creative guy. I met him backstage at a theater where I was doing sound tech work, and he came back to shake hands with everybody along with his wife, and they shook my hand. And sometime after that, I heard he had passed away, but I knew that he was not a believer in life after death. So I just sort of sent him a little mental note. I said, Steve, you're probably noticing that you're still conscious, you're still aware. That's because there is life after death, and I think now is a wonderful time for you to have an adventure and explore this. Well, it was maybe about a week or 2 weeks later that I was in my garage opening up my trunk, and then all of a sudden I'm just aware of a vision of Steve Allen up in the sort of upper left-hand corner, and he's thanking me. He's thanking me for giving him that little nod, and understanding that, oh yeah, I'm thank you for that, because I am surviving after death. So sometimes I just think people have to wait until they die to really experience that. Now, you had mentioned religion. My wife and I were both children of Lutheran pastors. And my whole family was what it was from, I call Lutheran mafia, aunts, uncles, cousins, lots of Lutheran ministers. And my wife's father was a missionary in Japan, doing fledgling Lutheran church work in Japan. And so when we both met, we both had this understanding of sort of standard, fairly liberal Lutheran theology. There's various sects. My father was especially liberal, but we both decided that this is not quite enough for us. Yes, we've been members of Lutheran churches, congregations here in California where we live now. Part of that is just because there are some advantages to having people in a congregation, but we've also been part of satsang, bhajan singing groups. We've been part of, we went to a wonderful place called Agape Spiritual Center here in California. And we more important, we started reading all the books we could find that started opening us up. The first was the Jane Roberts Seth books, who I think was quite instrumental for a lot of people getting an understanding. It was a channeled work of several books talking about what life on the other side is like, and there's an eternal validity of the soul. And then we discovered the Lazarus tapes and started listening to his lectures and meditations. And there was the Michael books, and so basically we were starting to teach ourselves and talk to other people, going to workshops, going to a spiritualist church, becoming friends with the pastor there, and just basically opening ourselves up to the wide array of what spirituality can be. And I'm sort of a universalist, I guess. I don't think there's anybody that goes to hell. I do think that there's hellish near-death experiences. I've read about them. PMH Atwater does a good job of talking about them. But what I think they are is people who believe that they might be going to hell, and they have some sort of vision. And usually what happens is they finally say, God, get me out of here. And then they finally go up to the light. So if that were to happen to me, I would just pray. I would just say, I want to be in a lighter place. But yeah, you can conjure up these hellish states, and I think that's sometimes what people do.
Yes, I have heard that also, is that whatever you're focusing on, you're going to manifest. Now, on this side, it takes us a long time to manifest. If we want to, build a doghouse, we have to go to the store and buy all the parts and hammer it together and put the dog inside. It takes a while. On the other side, if you think doghouse, it's like manifested instantaneously. Now, if on the other side, you're in a state of fear and dread and all that, you'll create and instantly manifest a world that is associated with that frequency, potentially, right? But like you said, if I'm done and I don't want this and I want out of here, I want, pure love and unconditional, well, you'll then hopefully manifest that instantly also. So these are the sorts of things that could be on the inside. Now, based on this experience, do you have a way to characterize what you would suggest would be God or Jesus or the Creator?
Well, I'm reading, I'm in a Zoom meditation group, and we just finished reading Jack Kornfield's wonderful book, A Path with Heart. But now we're reading a book by Marcus Borg called Meeting Jesus Again for the First Time. And he characterizes Jesus as a spirit person not necessarily holy men, because that's sort of a sexist, I mean, there are men and women who have been spirit people. There have been people, and he says in all different religions and indigenous people, this is just something that happens. And he sees Jesus as a spirit person. So I would say, yeah, I mean, Jesus is one of my great, I absolutely adore Jesus, and I communicate with Jesus, but several other people too. And so I think you don't have to throw the baby out with the bathwater, but it's religious exclusivity that I find I'm at issue with. When people say, no, my religion, it's my way or the highway, you're all going to hell. That is just a scare tactic. And I think it was originally kind of invented as crowd control. It's a way to control people, and I mean, after all, the Roman Empire had Christendom, and they still needed to basically control the masses. How do you do that? You start coming up with these stories about hell. Not so sure the early Christians were into that same kind of dichotomy or not. But all I know is that I am friends with all religions, and I'm friends with atheists and agnostics, and I just believe loving kindness should be what basically motivates us in life. And I've tried to make that mine. I do want a good life review, and so I did clean up my act, I think, quite a bit. Not that I've really been a reprobate or a kind of an evil person, but I just began to realize I can be kinder. I can be kinder in this situation, in that situation. I'm still working on it, but like being in line at the grocery store, there's no reason, if you're waiting a long time, to be angry at the clerk. They're dealing with what they have to deal with. And I just give them a big, genuine smile and look in their eyes, and you can just tell there's a sense of relief that comes over them. So I like to be a blessing of light every time I see people.
Peter, I love that, man. That is amazing. Everywhere you go, just smile, because the world's a mirror and it smiles right back at you. And it's like the ripples on the pond too. You higher your frequency, you increase your frequency, and then create a smile, and boom, the ripples go. That magnetic resonance that comes off our heart when we get close to other folks, they can feel it too. And so that's a great thing. So I love that, and you know what, in this crazy day, this is 2025 right now as we're recording this, and the world is kind of crazy, and we're in a world now where we are instantaneously updated and just barraged with information, whether it's social media or news or whatever it is, and you got to really kind of turn it off now and then. But, part of this also is that they talk about contact, with beings beyond our earthly plane. And I wonder if you have a perspective on that, if any of that has come up in your experience.
I co-founded a magazine called The Excluded Middle with Greg Bishop and Robert Larson, and we had like about 13 issues of the magazine that came out. There's a compendium of it called Wake Up down there, the Excluded Middle collection, and this is probably still available at some kind of used book source. And some of my writing is in there, Tales from the Shelf. And I did book reviews and interviews. So I have been, I guess I felt that I've been contacted by entities from an early age. I have memories of floating through the roof when I was, just like, 4 or 5 years old, and meeting up with somebody. But more recently, I was in 1973. I was in my parents' front driveway in the evening and with a friend, and I heard a voice say, "Look up, there's a UFO." And so I looked across at the horse pasture across the field, and there was this craft just took off, and it was sort of like a luminescent green amoeba shape, and then it went over the trees, but as it was going over the tree line, the light went out. So why would that contact me in my head? Why? I think that, oh yeah, and also I do have memories of, my wife once did a hypnosis on me, and I came up with a full abduction scenario memory with some details that I had only read in a couple other books subsequently by people who reported abductions. So I do think that they exist, but I think they're very, very quiet, and I don't think that they want to raise a lot of panic. I know there are people that think that, we're going to be able to start having contact on Earth here and now soon. But at any rate, I guess I feel like I'm enough of a believer that I read an awful lot of books about UFOs and was trying to figure out what they were all about. Nothing recent. There's nothing recent that I can report.
Yeah, okay. Well, that's a good summary there. I think it'll be interesting. There are those that talk about, contact in the future. It does seem that there are the powers that be that are trying to turn it into a fear thing where the aliens are coming to take over the world. And who knows, if you're another sort of life force that's more intelligent, more capabilities than that, you hopefully, potentially they're a little smarter and more intelligent and more gentle, and they would be coming here to help us. So who knows? If it happens, pretty much everyone's going to know about it, because in this hyper-connected world, you can't keep a secret like that. I wouldn't think. We'll find out. Hey, but you know what? This next section I have is called Heart's First Whisper, where I have some questions ready for you.
This sounds great.
Excellent. Well, hey, let's do this. We'll go into number 1 right here, which is, when you return to that diamond light in your mind, what stands out most in your heart now?
Oh, gratitude. Absolutely. Gratitude. Because through that experience, I've been able to be a much lighter-hearted person and hopefully provide an example and a light to those around me.
Yeah, I love that. And just like you said, just an example in the grocery store line, and really wherever you are in the world, it's an opportunity to smile. And oftentimes I love this too, because if you go into the grocery store line and the cashier's kind of beeping and checking you out, they're kind of caught in their role as a cashier. You can just say something real nice to them and break them out of their role and get them back to their soul, to their person, and get a smile out of them and have a nice day, and off you go. So the notion of compassion really everywhere is a beautiful thing. Try to live this life with unconditional love the best we can. And this feathers right into number 2, which is knowing this love is for everyone. How do you see everyday people differently?
At my best, I just feel like I'm looking at divinity. I'm divinity looking at divinity. We're all part of God, or all that is, or whatever word you want to use for something that's kind of really indefinable. We can't define what that is, but we're all part of it. And so I just feel like it's Jesus had a word about this in the Bible that talks about you do what you do unto the least of these, you do unto me. And I love that notion that we are just God meeting God. That's namaste. It's the divine in me salutes the divine in you.
That's amazing. I believe it or not, I just heard this a day or two ago, what namaste actually meant. The divine in me means meeting the divine in you. What a great saying, and I'm not sure how many people know that. So thanks for reminding us. This also brings in another comment that you made before. So tell me more about how you're feeling about this, which is number 3. You asked to come back for your wife and future children. How has that shaped how you love people now?
Well, we adopted 2 children from Russia when they were a sibling pair from Russia when they were 4 and 5 years old. And those are our children. And I just have to say, I would do it again in a heartbeat. It was not the easiest thing in the world, but boy, the results are fantastic. And now we have a new grandson who's 6 months old. My daughter gave birth 6 months ago, that we get to see every Sunday. And so I guess loving people, it comes naturally, I guess. I mean, and I'm thankful that I did come back, because I think about all these things that wouldn't be here it's kind of like It's a Wonderful Life. If there had been no me, there wouldn't be my grandchild. There wouldn't be the children. I don't know what would have happened to my wife. She maybe would have remarried, who knows? But, it would have been a shock to her system. So, and I guess just like you say, compassion and understanding. And everybody's different. Everybody has different personalities. You go with the flow. You work with that. And do your best in the process.
Right, exactly. Now here's a crazy kind of side question here, which is, if you hadn't had the NDE, how would you be different now?
I think I'd be more fearful of position, of grasping. One of the things that I refuse to do is work for corrupt people or be in a business that once I realize that maybe there's something to this that is not right, I won't be part of it. I don't believe in competition and fear in the workplace. I think people should cooperate. So I might have been more grasping onto work and be a little bit more tight with myself and not be quite as spontaneous. I mean, one of the things that I loved learning about after my near-death experiences was the Tao and Taoism, and how this idea of, instead of fighting the river, just kind of flow with the river and see where it takes you. And so that's been one of the things that I've tried to do in life and I've been in many different careers, many different interesting situations, and I've met all kinds of wonderful people. And I'm so happy that I've had that opportunity. Lots of different communities: theater community, musician community, public radio community, and now I'm in the art world, colleges and universities and art teachers and art students. And I just have this wonderful love for all the people that I've had a chance to meet in this life.
I'd say it was super fortunate that you were able to have this at 20 years old and reshape the rest of your life that early. And by the way, that influences what you had just said, influences this number 4, which is after your NDE, you refused inhumane work and cutthroat culture, which is great because before an NDE, and if you don't know that there's any more than just this life, you might get kind of caught up in, like you said, grabbing life a little tighter and just thinking that you just have to, excel and exceed and step on someone to move forward, right? But after an NDE, you probably realize, no, it's unconditional love. And that means that I have unconditional love for myself, but also for others as well. And so now the question continues, how do you feel we are meant to work and create together?
Well, in a perfect world, we would have the compassion and understanding. Unfortunately, there are people that are grasping and in some positions, and you just kind of have to understand, well, they haven't had the advantages I've had. I cut them some slack, but on the other hand, if somebody is underhanded or something like that, not that I'm encountering that at all now, or if they're gossipy, and if I really just want to walk out of the room if they're telling kind of stories about other people. I don't feel that that's proper to do that. That's not a very loving thing to do, to be gossipy and who even knows if it's true, what you're hearing.
Well, even if it is true, I think it isn't sort of a high frequency thing to do. And maybe that's the idea, your frequency is higher. You love being around folks that you resonate with, resonation, similar frequencies, if you have a tuning fork at 528 and you hit it, other tuning forks are going to go, I don't really care. But another tuning fork at 528 is going to start ringing like crazy just because of the resonant frequency. That feels like, that's like you in the grocery line, and then bringing that 528 hertz out of the cashier or just by smiling and making a nice comment. So yes, I agree. Hey, number 5 now, here's, more creativity. In your music and radio and your modeling, where do you feel that light flowing most strongly these days?
I've kind of stopped the music and radio, interestingly enough. I almost feel like I feel like relaxing into life. I produce so much, really just loads and loads of things, and writing, poetry, music, and I now kind of am just enjoying being there for people, standing before them, letting them draw my body, because this is just a matter of the light. I just feel like it flows from my body, and sometimes what I'll do is I'll remember the love I've gotten from various teachers, gurus, interesting people, and then I radiate that love out. What I've received, then I want to radiate out to the students, and so it's almost palpable. So students have a lot of things to worry about: grades, student debt, early relationships. I mean, I remember, that age is not, college age is not easy. High school age is not easy. So I just hope that they leave with a kind of sense of uplift, not necessarily even sure why. They don't have to say it's because of me, although I do get some interesting comments sometimes. People seem to notice, and some people draw halos on me that's something that I don't understand why that happens, but they're sensing something, I guess.
Well, that's clear. Yeah, they're getting an indication for sure. From the way you look at them, the smile, maybe the comments, the sort of the level of ease that you have as you're in front of them, all that probably combines. Well, that's beautiful. Hey, and that brings us to number 6, which is there a recent moment of synchronicity or guidance that made you think, yes, I'm still being led?
When a schoolmate, Bonnie, came and said she had had cancer for several years and had passed, and I hadn't heard of her death, and I checked, and indeed it had happened, and she had been like she had loved Jesus, and was full of light herself, and that's just an example of where, I'm meeting people and I'm following up and I'm realizing this is a real thing. I seem to have this real capacity to have this communication with the other side.
Yes, and with that connection to the other side, and a lot of people talk about us having spirit guides that kind of nudge us back onto our blueprint, our path. Even though we have free will, we might get a little crazy. And it sounds like with your connection, maybe you have even a better connection to the other side, so your nudges are more clear and more direct and kind of keep you on the straight and narrow of a path that was meant. If you had a life blueprint in prior to this life, that is quite a helping hand. And hey, that takes us to our 7th and final question, which is, when you cross over again, what do you hope your loved ones remember or feel about you and that love you encountered?
I just hope that they take it as an example. I mean, I don't need to be remembered as a saint or anything like that. That's not what I want. I'm basically hoping that they'll just be inspired. I like being around that Peter guy, that's like something I'd like to do, is to basically try to model that for myself and for other people.
Beautiful. Well, hey, as we wrap up, do you have any sort of last thought you want to share? Remember, the folks coming to watch and to listen to this thing, they love doing this for a couple of many, many different reasons. Oftentimes it's they didn't have an NDE and they really want one, but it's really only for a certain number of people to have those and then to come back and share. And so they love that. So how would you summarize the impact on you and maybe the guidance you would give to others?
Feel free to read the books about it. Feel free to go to the websites. Feel free to watch Brad Peterson's show, and there are other good podcasts speaking about near-death experiences. If the podcasts are based on some sort of particular religion and are trying to denigrate certain kinds of near-death experiences, I would say avoid those, because they've got sort of an axe to grind. And also, I just want to say, I know that my relationship with my wife, we just recently had our 50th wedding anniversary. I just have to say, the night before we got married, I had a vision of a spirit person from India, and it took me years to figure out who that was. I found out later it was Sri Yukteswar, who was Yogananda's teacher. So he's been one of my spirit guides. But not only did he visit me, the visit woke me up. I turned on a light, and a neighbor woman who was being attacked by someone who said he was going to kill her saw the light and fled, and the woman survived. She was beat up somewhat, but she survived. So these are signs to me that this relationship that I had was meant to be and very important. So you can see why I didn't want to just abandon it, quickly. So yeah, that's another really that's a whole other story that is pretty fantastic and amazing. And also it indicates to me that every life can have some kind of purpose, and it's not necessarily, it wasn't me that saved the woman's life. It was the fact that I was visited by one of my guides who said, hey, something's going on here, and got me out of bed. And I turned on the light. And so you never know where inspiration might be coming from. Try to listen for your own spirit guides. I have several. I know their names, or at least the names that they've given me to use. And you can't go wrong, and if you don't know them right away, maybe meditate, learn meditation. Try to find a teacher, though. It's recommended to have a teacher or else a good guide online. But meditation can help open up a lot, and you might start getting some answers.
I like the meditation advice to go inward, to look for it inside as opposed to outside you. So I think that's a great notion. And by the way, congratulations on your 50th wedding anniversary. And I hear that tomorrow you have a birthday.
I'll be 71 years old tomorrow. And so it has been, over 50 years ago that this happened. And I still remember my near-death experience plain as day.
Beautiful. Well, thank you for sharing it. So Peter, I got to tell you, thank you so much for being here today and for trusting us with such an intimate and unusual near-death experience. It takes a lot of courage to bring something this personal into the public space, and I'm deeply gratified that you were willing to do that with our audience, especially after all these years. So thank you as well for the way you've lived this experience out over decades, through your creativity, your integrity in the workplace, and your quiet service in classrooms and studios. That's beautiful. Hey, and if folks want to get in touch with you, what is the best way for them to reach out?
My email is probably the best way. My email address is stonemound@gmail.com. That's stonemound@gmail.com.
Beautiful. And they will find that in the description, so they can click on that and send you an email. I'm sure they enjoyed this for sure. They may have additional questions. And by the way, to our listeners, if Peter's story moved you, be sure to like, subscribe, and share. And let us know in the comments. I love the comments. Get in there and reply to every one of them. And if this episode spoke to your heart, share it with someone who might need a little light today. All righty? So thank you very much, Peter.
Much gratitude.
And until next time, keep questioning, keep exploring, and go beyond the illusion to discover your true self. Take care, everyone, and bye for now.